For the longest time, we've seen data presented in these static charts and graphs, right? It's a fixed picture telling one single story. But what if that picture could actually come to life? That's what we're diving into today, this big shift from static images to dynamic tools that let you really discover things for yourself.
So let's start with this idea. What if a chart could answer your next question before you even think to ask it? Seriously, think about that. What if, instead of just looking at a chart, you could become an active explorer of that data? That right there, that's the core idea behind interactive visualization. It's this powerful evolution that puts the ability to discover right in your hands.
And this shift, well, it's a completely new way of thinking. It's a new paradigm. We're moving away from data being this monologue, where someone just presents you with a single fixed viewpoint. Instead, we're moving into a genuine dialogue with the data, where you, the user, get to ask the questions, poke around, and find your own insights.
So, what's the real difference here? Well, think about it like this. Traditional static charts are kind of like a closed book. They're perfect for a printed report, sure, but they give you just one single fixed view. An interactive dashboard, on the other hand, is built for a screen. It's practically begging you to click, to filter, to explore. It's really the difference between just looking at a map and actually using a GPS. Okay, so if we had to put a formal definition on it, what would it be? Well, an interactive visualization is a user-centric interface that allows for dynamic exploration and manipulation of data. Now, the key words there are user-centric, it's built for you, and dynamic. The view changes based on what you do, creating this responsive and, honestly, super engaging experience.
All right, so why is this such a big deal? Why does this shift even matter? It's simple, really. It's all about turning a passive viewer into an active participant. And that one little change has a huge impact on how we actually understand data. First off, it really encourages you to dig deeper. When you can poke and prod at the data, you can uncover hidden patterns or weird outliers that a static chart would totally miss. It also makes things a lot clearer by tackling what we call information overload. Instead of just throwing all the data at you at once, it lets you see details on demand. And finally, it lets you focus on what's actually relevant to you by letting you filter things down to exactly the pieces of data you care about.
So how do we actually have this dialogue with data? Well, it all comes down to a few core interaction techniques. You can think of these as the fundamental vocabulary, the basic tools you use to ask your questions.
Probably the most common one, the one you see everywhere, is the hover effect that brings up a tooltip. This is the classic details on demand technique. What's so great about it is that it lets you keep the main view nice and clean, but gives you that rich, specific info the second you show interest in a data point just by moving your mouse over it.
And you can see it right here. As the cursor glides over that line graph, bam, a little window, the tooltip, pops up with the exact values for that specific point in time. It gives you instant context and precision, but without cluttering up the whole chart. It's just a really elegant and super effective solution.
Now, beyond just hovering, there are a few other key actions in the toolkit. Of course, there's clicking to select and highlight specific things. Then you've got filtering, which lets you show or hide entire categories of data. Zoom and pan are absolutely essential when you're dealing with massive datasets, kind of like navigating a map. And a really powerful one is linked views, where clicking on one chart automatically updates all the other charts on the dashboard at the same time. Okay, so how do we actually build these things? What are the tools of the trade? The software world for this is huge, but we can pretty much break it down into a few main categories, and each one has its own pros and cons.
This chart pretty much sums up the big trade-off you have to make: ease of use versus customization. So way over on one side, you have these powerful web libraries like D3.js. They give you total freedom to create something completely unique, but you gotta know how to code. Then on the complete opposite end, you have dashboard tools like Tableau or Power BI. They're way easier to use for standard stuff, but you're a bit more locked into their templates. And somewhere in the middle, you've got these no-code platforms that try to give you the best of both worlds, more customization, but without needing a programming degree.
But look, having the right tool is really only half the battle. For an interactive visualization to actually work, to be effective, it has to be designed with the user in mind. It needs to feel intuitive from the get-go. There are really three core principles you need to nail. First is clarity. A user should just know what they can click on, what they can hover over. No guessing games. Second, consistency. Your design language has to be consistent. If a blue dot means good in one chart, it better mean good in the next one too. And finally, feedback. The system has to react instantly when a user does something, so they know their click or tap actually registered.
And you really want to get this right, because if you don't, you're not just creating a frustrating tool, you can actually make people lose trust in the data itself. So let's talk about what to avoid, the 3 deadly sins of interactive design.
First up, we've got the ugly mistakes. These are all about aesthetics, basically just visual clutter. This usually happens when you try to cram way too much information into one chart, or you give the user so many buttons and sliders that they're just paralyzed by choice. It totally defeats the purpose of making things clear.
Then there are the bad mistakes. These are really perception problems. If the controls are hidden or it's not obvious what a button does, the user might not even realize they can interact with the chart. All that potential for discovery is just lost, and the whole thing ends up being confusing and pretty much useless.
And finally, we have the most serious category of all, the wrong mistakes. These aren't just ugly or confusing, these are mathematical issues where the visualization is just plain, objectively incorrect. The classic example is chopping off the bottom of a bar chart's y-axis to make small differences look huge. I mean, that's not just bad design, that's actively misleading your audience and completely destroying their trust.
All right, so let's bring this out of the classroom and into the wild. Where do these interactive visualizations actually show up in the real world? Well, the truth is, they're everywhere, often hiding in plain sight in the tools we use every single day.
I mean, think about it. They're in the business dashboards that CEOs use to track company performance. They're in the health systems that doctors use to analyze patient data. And, of course, they're in the weather and traffic apps on your phone that help you plan your day. Every one of those tools lets you filter, zoom, and explore really complex data in a simple, intuitive way.
Oh, and video games are another amazing example of this. They often use what are called isotope plots, using a bunch of little icons to show a quantity for things you need to recognize instantly, like your health or ammo. And then after a match, they give you these incredibly detailed interactive charts that literally tell the story of the game, letting you break down your performance and see what you did right or wrong.
And all of this really brings us to the main point, the core takeaway. Interaction is genuinely transformative. It turns someone who's just passively watching into an active analyst. But, and this is a big but, every single interactive element, every button, every filter, every tooltip, it has to serve a clear purpose. Either it's there to clarify something, to help someone explore, or to let them discover something new. So as you go forward and think about creating visualizations yourself, I want you to remember this. Your goal isn't just to show data. It's to design an entire space for discovery. So the real question you should be asking isn't what data do I have? It's what questions will I empower my users to answer for themselves?